Okay, this screencast is going to start in the middle of the Iranian hostage crisis, so depending on where your class left off in this event, you can fast forward as needed. We know that the United States has the Shah of Iran, and that the people of Iran want the Shah returned to them, and thus there are angry protesters gathered outside of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. And these protesters are very angry. They actually gather a large enough mob in which they charge the embassy building, and they take 52 Americans hostage. Now, during this hostage period, the Iranian radicals basically want to trade the 52 Americans they have for the Shah. So if the U.S. would give up the Shah, then they would relinquish the 52 American hostages. And Jimmy Carter is president, so he has to decide what to do. And it's a very tense period, but if you know anything about this from other instances in history, the U.S. does not negotiate with terrorists. So Jimmy Carter is going to refuse to give up the Shah. And so this standoff is going to last for over a full year, in which many Americans are pleading on both sides of the issue. Some want him to give in, some don't want him to give in. Because they, of course, would love to see those Americans returned home. But honestly, the Iranian radicals really just kind of wanted to teach Carter a lesson about taking the Shah in the first place and allowing him to seek refuge there. So when the next president, Ronald Reagan, is sworn into office, on his inauguration day itself, suddenly the Iranian radicals release all 52 of the American hostages, almost to make Reagan look so much better than Carter, because, you know, Reagan's going to get all the praise and glory for this. But in the end, the hostages were held in Iran for over a full year, 444 days. Okay, we're going to transition to some environmental events and changes in society that make people more concerned about the environment, and it's kind of a movement that we very much feel present in our society today, but it really starts in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, kind of when Americans start realizing the true implications of all of the industry that has developed over the past 100 years. And the first thing we're going to see is the first ever Earth Day established. Earth Day is set for April 22nd. The first ever Earth Day was April 22nd of 1970. And its purpose is a day that's set aside for environmental education in schools and in communities. I think this year Earth Day was during spring break, so I don't know that we celebrated anything specifically at school, but perhaps in science classes. Okay, good. Okay, another thing that is created kind of from this environmental movement is the EPA, which you probably have heard of, the Environmental Protection Agency. This is something that Nixon actually kind of had a large hand in the early 70s, in which he created this government agency that has the power to set and enforce pollution standards across the country. They also conduct environmental research each year and kind of oversee state governments and local governments controlling their pollution. And they'll adjust standards year after year depending on the research they collect and the data they collect. But this is the agency that would kind of punish and kind of go after, like, for example, different chemical plants that emitted too much chemicals, too much large amounts of chemicals into the air after a certain amount of years. So this movement is going to continue, and it's still something we very much see in existence today. We do eventually see a large opposition to the movement, because with this concern for the environment also is going to come the risk of job loss, because if you put limits on different industries, then they're going to have to make cuts to their budget, and they're going to have to lay people off. And so some people are of the belief, well, let's not be so environmentally conscious, let's not make it a stressor, we need to worry about our economy now and benefiting the people now. And that kind of discrepancy and that those two sides of the spectrum are seen even to this day. If you look at things like global warming, some people feel like global warming needs to be at at the forefront of American concerns, and some people want to ignore that it even exists. So it's kind of a battle on both sides, even to this day. The last thing we're going to learn in the screencast is really an introduction to a new movement, a new conservative movement, and that is really a new era of conservative politics with a new president who's going to be the president for the entire 1980s, and that, of course, is Ronald Reagan. Definitely, he kind of brings into American standards concerns over social issues and moral issues, but also he wants to see great change in economic issues. And he saw that in the 70s and early 80s there are a lot of economic problems in the United States, and that's kind of coming off the heels of that stagflation period that Nixon had to deal with. And Reagan wants to fix that, and so he is going to attempt to fix this large problem with his policy known as Reaganomics, which is a combination of extreme budget cuts but also extreme tax cuts, which involves the American people having more money to spend since they're paying less in income tax, and then the money should cycle naturally through the economy and hopefully get Americans back on their feet. Unfortunately, Reagan's policy also included increased defense spending, which was not ideal when being mixed with the tax cuts, because that's less government money to be able to have in their budget, but then they're increasing their budget in that way. So that's the only kind of economic downturn with Reaganomics, and we'll kind of look at the effects of that again in a later part of this chapter. And that's all for now. So if you have any questions, please write them down. Listen to the screencasts again if necessary, and shout out to my 7th hour Hush class, who is very cooperative when recording the screencasts. Thank you.